If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
St. Louis Mayor Tishaura Jones says she started thinking about re-election the day she was sworn into office in 2021. She can point to lower crime and record investment in the city's most distressed areas, but she'll also have to address anger over the city's response to a winter storm and problems with the administration of her business grant program. The mayor joins me next on the latest episode of Politically Speaking to talk about the primary campaign. Let's hit the music.
This is Politically Speaking, the definitive show about politics in the St. Louis region.
I thought this was an opportunity to have a new voice in that seat.
And the decisions I make in county government allows me to help people in large groups, and I enjoy it.
We're not using it as a wedge issue. We're using it more as a, what's right for the region conversation.
We need to know what the issues are in our communities in order to address them.
Because people want to see change, and they want to see a St. Louis that works for everyone.
Some days I need the credit, most days I don't, but most importantly, I have to be able to control how this environment is going to evolve.
We knew that in races that have multiple candidates, the only way you win is in the streets.
And welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm your host, Rachel Lippman. Joining me in studio for one of many conversations we're going to be having ahead of St. Louis's municipal primary is
Mayor Tishaura Jones.
She is seeking a second term in room 200. That's the mayor's office at City Hall. And tell me a little bit about when and why you decided that you were going to seek a second term to be the mayor of the city.
Well, I decided to seek a second term right after I was inaugurated for my first. I knew that the problems that the city was facing are long-term, and they cannot be fixed in just one term or possibly two. We have to make sure that we are enacting long-lasting, sustainable change, and oftentimes that takes more than 4 years.
What have you learned that is different running as an incumbent than when you're running as somebody who is either in a different office or not holding political office at all?
One of the things I've learned running as an incumbent is that a lot of times people don't know all of the good things that you're doing. We inherited a lot of old processes, and we have been hard at work to try to update those. And in our quest to update things and to just get the work done, a lot of times, the public doesn't see that or doesn't feel that. And so we're talking about changes that you can see and feel, but a lot of times, a lot of that change is that block building change, the non-sexy things that go on the government level or in the office that require a lot of changing of systems behind the scenes.
So give me an example of something that maybe was not up to the 21st century standard when you took office that you have been able to do, like you said, the unsexy government accomplishment.
We don't have enough time for me to talk about those, but I'll give you two examples. Our finance system, for example, was still on an old mainframe. Many of your listeners may remember the old AS400. We were still using an AS400 mainframe for many of our financial systems, and so we upgraded that. And as of April 2024, we don't hand out physical paper pay stubs anymore. Also personnel. When I took office, we were still using typewriters in personnel, actually taking the information once someone applied online. They thought it was computerized, but it was not. They would apply online, and then personnel would take that information and type it onto a physical card and then file that card. So now we've upgraded the system to a system called Taleo, and now people can apply for multiple positions if they so choose. And it's a electronic sort of paper trail or an electronic trail of when applications are sent to the departments, when the department responds. And so now there's a lot more accountability and a shorter process.
So how do you campaign or advertise or talk about the non-sexy government things when people want to know, is my trash going to get picked up? Are you getting the snow plow so you can plow my side streets?
Well, I tell people that these are the things that we need to do in order to make sure we can hire more drivers in an efficient manner, in a faster manner, so we can pick up your trash, so we can fill the potholes. A lot of these things are, like I said, foundation laying things that we have to do right in order to do the small things correctly.
What has been the biggest surprise about being in room 200, being the mayor of the city of St. Louis?
I would say the age of City Hall. It is a beautiful building. However, it is very old. And there are things like for the longest time, I didn't know how to turn the lights on in my office and found out that it was in an electrical panel 2 offices away. Oops. But I will say that, working as mayor has been my dream job, and it's been something that I have loved to do for the last 4 years, and have been privileged to do for the last 4 years, and able to see change in real time and talk to people in real time as they have seen things change in their neighborhoods or in their homes.
Aside from not knowing how to turn the lights on in your office, what was the biggest lesson that you learned in your 4 years?
The biggest lesson I have learned in my 4 years is that city government does not move at the same pace as private industry. And when people see that we have passed these multi-million dollar appropriations bills for street paving, for example, then that just starts the process for the Board of Public Service to then go through a almost 800-day process from the time an appropriation is passed till we see shovels in the streets, paving streets. So these are long processes that are within our city charter, within our city ordinances, and they take time. So city government does not move at the same pace as private industry, and a lot of people are impatient with that.
Are there changes that need to be made to those processes so that people realize and can see government is working faster than 800 days?
Yes, absolutely. There are changes that need to be made, and we started those changes with the Charter Commission that met last spring. President Megan Green has also continued that process with another special committee on the charter that's going to continue to take a look at our charter and continue to propose legislation to go on the ballot because the charter hasn't been changed in a comprehensive way in a really long time. And so it's like an elephant. So how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so that's the way I see our city charter and some of the outdated laws that are in our city charter.
Why should voters give you a second term in your dream job?
Voters should give me a second term because we want to continue the work that we're already doing. And this is a time in our nation's history where we are dealing with the incoming new administration. I already have existing relationships with the federal bureaucracy, with the bureaucrats that are there. Sometimes it doesn't matter who's leading the department, but it's the bureaucrats that stay there term to term to term. And I've spent the last 4 years creating those relationships and bringing money back to the city because of those relationships. Voters should give me a second term because there's still a lot more work to do, and this is not the time to press the reset button. It takes time to build up a team. It takes time to get used to how things work, and right now my team is experienced and ready to continue to lead the city into this next term.
In your State of the City last year, you said St. Louis is my city and she's in the middle of a renaissance. Is the city still in the middle of a renaissance?
Yes, absolutely. If you read any articles that come out from Forbes or there was a recent article from Missouri Growth Association of where our stats are in GDP growth and population growth and number of jobs created. And if you look towards the future of the things that we have planned for the future of St. Louis, a new airport, which is a game changer for our region, new MetroLink. There are a number of things that are planned for our future that are going to lead to exponential growth.
When we talked on filing day, you said that your campaign was going to be about showing people exactly where we have improved some of the things that they're most concerned about. What are those things, and where has the city most improved?
We've improved in several places. So I made a promise to invest in communities that haven't been invested in decades. If you go online right now to the Community Development Administration, there is an entire map of all of our investments in housing, in transportation infrastructure through our friendly streets. There's $300 million there. In rehabs and healthy home repair. The work on that map speaks for itself. And so I have kept my promise to investing in areas that need it the most.
And where does work still need to be done?
Work still needs to be done in those same places. You know, we're talking about areas of our city that have been neglected for up to 7 decades, and you can't fix that in 4 years or even 8 years. But we need to lay the groundwork to continue so that work continues well beyond me being mayor of the city.
What do you think is going to be the hardest thing for you to overcome in this campaign? What is going to be maybe a metaphorical albatross when you go on the doors that you know people are going to ask about and you maybe just don't have the best answer for it right now?
Well, I don't necessarily think I don't have the best answer for this, but we're dealing with the perception of crime versus the reality of crime. The reality is that homicides have decreased over 40% since I became mayor in 2021, and that overall violent crime has decreased over 20% since I became mayor in 2021. St. Louis is safer as a result of all of the things that we have implemented, but it's really hard to tell that story to someone who has been a victim of crime or who has experienced that, and we realize that this is not us, saying that crime is over. This is us saying we're making progress. It's not perfect, and we're going to continue to make progress well into the future.
So what is the strategy to make hearts and minds believe the numbers? Because like you said, the numbers do paint that a crime is better now. Certainly not solved, but better. So how do you get perception to line up with reality?
Well, it takes time, and that and trust is built at the speed of time. So they'll just have to trust us, hopefully trust us that we are reporting the right data, and we are reporting the right data. That data is transparent up on our website at slmpd.org/stats. They can drill down to their specific neighborhoods or use our crime mapping tool to see crime in real time. And we realize that we have a long way to go, but we are putting the things in place to make sure that this that we can decrease crime and that it's sustainable.
Do you think it is sustainable? Is there something unique that you're doing in St. Louis that is allowing this to happen?
I would say yes, there is something unique that we're doing in St. Louis to make this sustainable, which is our regional crime initiative called Save Lives Now, where we're working with every municipal leader from O'Fallon, Missouri to O'Fallon, Illinois, and everywhere in between. And we are committed to reducing homicides and gun violence by an additional 20% over the next 3 years through focused deterrence, through targeted outreach, through street outreach, and through cognitive behavioral theory. These are things that have been tried and tested in many cities across the country, and we are bringing it to St. Louis and tweaking it for our environment and letting it roll.
You give a lot of credit to programs like Cure Violence in bringing down some of this crime, or the role that they've played in bringing down crime, but there's some research that shows it may not have had the impact in all areas. How do you determine whether things like Cure Violence or other programs that you're initiating are delivering the results that you're expecting them to?
Well, I would say not so much Cure Violence, but the Office of Violence Prevention as a whole, which Cure Violence is a part of. The Office of Violence Prevention contracts with over 50 grassroots organizations who know what the triggers are in their particular communities, because we believe the people closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And so our community partners, along with the Office of Violence Prevention, along with the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office and our police department, are all working in tandem to share data and also to reduce crime.
How would you rate the city's response to the most recent winter storm?
I would rate, if I had to give our city a grade, it would be a B minus, because we still don't have enough drivers. And I thank our streets department for working 24-hour shifts throughout the storm.
That was divided into 2 12s, right? You didn't have drivers out on the road
right.
for 24 hours straight.
Exactly.
Okay.
Two 12-hour shifts, right. But we still don't yet have enough drivers, and we are constantly working to hire more drivers. But remember, our drivers need a specific license in order to drive our heavy equipment. They need CDL. So if anybody within the sound of my voice has a CDL that wants to come work for the city, we'll take you. I also heard from many of my county counterparts that as soon as you cross the city border from city to county, that our roads were clear. So that's why I would say a B minus. The other thing is, we don't yet have smaller trucks to go down some of our smaller side streets, and streets like mine, it's a problem, getting off of our streets. But once you hit the main thoroughfares, it's smooth sailing.
Some of the sharpest criticism for how the storm was handled comes from advocates and groups that provide services to people who are homeless. And one group over the weekend said they got into an impossible situation because there wasn't anywhere to take people overnight who needed a place to come out of the cold overnight. Was the city prepared to house a number of people who would have needed shelter?
Yeah, absolutely. We had over 900 beds available for overnight shelter. I will say that one thing that happens during winter storms is that, and during any sort of adverse impact, is that we get calls from the county, from county institutions to send their homeless to the city. The city has been responsible for shouldering the burden of homeless services for the entire region for as long as I can remember, and that's not sustainable. So one of the ways that I'm trying to address that is that I called a homeless summit back in October as the chair of East West Gateway Council of Governments, and we are trying to shift our focus because we realize that the model for keeping people housed is a housing first model, not expanding shelter beds. And so that's going to take a paradigm shift in how we provide housing services. And so we're moving towards that. We have a plan to move towards a housing first model, and change is hard. But we also had a RFP back in October, and very few organizations responding, and it was an RFP for emergency shelters during winter events. Very few organizations responded to that RFP.
Was there feedback that you got from the people who didn't respond as to why they felt they couldn't take on running an emergency shelter?
No, I honestly don't know the ins and outs or the in particulars of that.
And we'll be right back after this quick break.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.
And we're back on Politically Speaking with Mayor Tishaura Jones. And I think one of the big uncertainties for whoever gets into Room 200 after this election is going to be the ongoing impact of earnings tax refunds. I think the city's paid out about $40 million for 21, 22, and 2021 and 22.
Yeah.
We're still waiting on 23.
Right.
Did the city underestimate how many people were going to be interested in taking these back refunds?
We absolutely underestimated that. We set aside $26 million in the fiscal year 24 budget or 25 budget in anticipation of people filing refunds, but we had no idea that was going to inflate to almost $40 million. And as a result of that, we'll have to have a more conservative approach to our budget for fiscal year 26.
And what could be the impact on city services if you are losing $40 million in revenue every year and potentially more because of these refunds?
We're still trying to determine what the impact is going to be. because we're going to have to take a conservative approach. It's going to be almost like Congress, like passing a continuing resolution with the same budget for the next year.
Hopefully you're not doing it 2 days before the government shuts down.
We will not do it 2 days before the government shuts down. But taking that conservative approach may unfortunately mean that people won't get as large a raise as they have experienced in the past.
How is the work of your long-term Revenue Advisory Council going?
I haven't had a recent report. They are still, looking through all of the data and also taking a look at how this last was a Proposition V on the ballot is going to impact our future revenue. But they're still working really hard.
I know that the city has gotten all of its American Rescue Plan Act dollars allocated. Do you think they'll be able to get it spent in the time frame required?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Given you were talking about having to be conservative with the city's budget because of the uncertainty over the earnings tax, how do you maintain some of the programs and support that were spun up using the American Rescue Plan Act when the city has so many other needs?
Well, we were smart in that we didn't create any new programs with American Rescue Plan Act money. We knew that these were one-time funds. The only program that we stood up was the Office of Violence Prevention, and now that is a part of the city's budget. I wanted to make sure that we did that well before ARPA ran out. And we're making sure that, again, we're spending it on one-time expenses.
St. Louis Post-Dispatch found that there were some problems administering Northside business grants. Some of the businesses didn't exist. They were based outside of the city or outside of the intended targets. What went wrong there with the administration of that program?
Well, I also want to make sure that your listeners know that these were conditional awards that were announced, and no business that wasn't in business received any money. And I would say that the main issue with the administering of that program was that we received over $400 million in requests for $34 million in funds. So the need was greater than the amount that we had to give. And when we announced that first round of conditional awards that still needed to be vetted, by the time we had announced those, some of those businesses didn't exist anymore because of the time it took between the time that the application went in to the time that we announced the awards. We extended that deadline several times because we had to work with other companies or other individuals we wanted to make sure that they were completing the grant application properly so they wouldn't just get kicked out because they forgot a piece or didn't submit a budget. So we worked diligently with those organizations and those businesses to make sure that they could submit a complete application.
How do you plan to convince people that your administration can appropriately spend the rest of the RAMS money, which is a big unrestricted chunk of funds that are out there?
Well, I mean, I don't understand the question. We spent the ARPA money, so we will spend the RAMS money, and the RAMS money doesn't have a time limit on it. So I think those two things you're conflating two different things.
Speaking of that RAMS money, there's two competing ideas out there as to how the money should be distributed. Which one more closely aligns with your thought as to how that pot should be spent?
Well, there are two different proposals, and I did work with President Green on the proposal that Alderwoman Saunier introduced a few weeks ago, which obviously closer aligns with my priorities because we want to invest in people, we want to invest in infrastructure, and we want to invest in economic development. I think that our approach is more balanced, and the approach from Greater St. Louis, Inc. Lacked a lot of specificity, but that's how legislation works. You get two proposals and then you meet somewhere in the middle. So we hope to have those conversations and negotiations to see where we can meet in the middle.
There has been a lot of chatter about the St. Louis Business Journal article detailing the number of trips that you took during your first 4 years. What's been the return on investment for the city for those trips that you took?
Well, I mean, what part are people upset about? Are they upset about the relationship building? Are they upset about me bringing back almost $1 billion for the city of St. Louis and not costing the taxpayers a dime? Are they upset about increasing St. Louis's national profile and, again, not costing St. Louis a dime. You know, St. Louisans have always talked about how we are the flyover city. We are not at the table. Well, sometimes it requires us to physically be at the table in order to be considered for a lot of these awards. I mean, look at our sports, for example. We have major Division I sporting events every year up until 2027. We have attracted more business to the city of St. Louis. In particular, in November alone, we have $1 billion in investment in St. Louis. So I believe that the work that I have done has on my own dime, has made St. Louis millions of dollars in returns.
We talked earlier in the podcast about some of the possible charter changes that are coming out. There's a bill pending from Alderwoman Daniela Velazquez to sharply reduce the power of the mayor's office. And I don't think it passes this term just because of timing, and it's a complicated conversation to have. But should the mayor remain the administrative head of the city of St. Louis, or should that duty be turned over to someone else, like a city manager? Well,
I wish that Alderwoman Velazquez would have talked to me before she introduced that piece of legislation. And I don't believe that, at least in my term, that the mayor should have power taken away from that position. The mayor, according to the charter, is the CEO, and I have been acting as the CEO of our city for the last 4 years. I feel like it's been somewhat of a slap in the face to not have discussions about legislative proposals before you introduce them, especially when you consider people to be your allies.
From a just purely thinking about it perspective, does it make sense to have the CEO also be the political head of the city? Do you feel like you have enough time to do both of the jobs well enough?
Absolutely. And with the increase in technology, even being out of town is still being in town. And how did we conduct our business when we were all at home during the pandemic? We all had Zoom and we had phones. So the advent of new technology allows us to be in several places at once.
What do you use as your Zoom background in Zoom meetings?
Sometimes it depends on how my devices are working. I have a background that's actually my office. But when that's not there, I just blur my background.
The majority of the mayoral candidates in this primary are Black. And given the dynamics of the city of St. Louis, do you think that might have an impact on the outcome? And if so, what?
I don't think that'll have an impact on the outcome because we do have a new system of voting called approval voting. And so vote splitting, while is still possible, is not as prevalent as it was in the 2017 race.
There is a population of people that could impact the results of the election, maybe not turn it, but, change numbers. And that is individuals who are being held in the City Justice Center, but have not lost their right to vote because they've not been convicted of a crime. Are there any plans from your campaign to reach out to those individuals?
Not at this time. It is really difficult to have that kind of conversation with the detainees currently in the Justice Center, so that would require a lot of coordination on our part.
Is Aiden excited about the prospect of being as the second term as the first son?
I think he goes back and forth. It depends on the day. But I do think that I have tried to make sure that his life is as normal as possible. He's driving himself to school now, and he has his own life, and that comes with a set of nervousness and anxiety on my part. But for the most part, he is just concerned about getting through this next year and a half and going on to college.
He's getting scouted, if I remember correctly, to play basketball or other sports?
Yes, he is a really good basketball player. He's about 6'7", and
he's a tall kid.
Yeah, he's a small forward for Cardinal Ritter College Prep. Go Lions!
How have you, in your first term, worked to make the city better for him?
So, what I've done to make the city better for him, because he is always at the front of my thoughts of like, what am I doing to make St. Louis a place where he would want to come back to, and that is addressing some of the historic wrongs in St. Louis, because I'm sure he sees it as he's driving around when he crosses Del Mar, how the neighborhood changes significantly, or when he's going to drop his friends off. And I want to make sure that we erase that dividing line that is Del Mar Boulevard, and he can feel safe driving around or walking around or biking around the city no matter where he is. And to feel safe, and for all of our children to feel safe in their neighborhoods, no matter their location. Our zip codes should not determine our opportunity or our life expectancy or our access to services. And that's the kind of St. Louis I'm trying to build.
Mayor Jones, thank you for being on the podcast. Where can people find your campaign on social media if they want to follow along?
To follow along on our campaign, they can go to our Facebook page at Mayor Tishaura Jones. We're not on X anymore for obvious reasons, and on Instagram, it's just it's at Tishaura on X, and
you said Instagram.
Instagram,
too.
Yeah, Instagram is at Tishaura. Yep.
Politically Speaking is a production of St. Louis Public Radio, which is part of the University of Missouri St. Louis. Until next time, so long.